I showed up at fall ball, having really no idea what Division I football was like, coming from a pretty small private school. Good competition, played a lot of public schools, but the system was new to me. The whole idea of football is your life. I asked, what are we going to do on Sunday? And they told me play football. There are no days off. So that was interesting. I had strained my hip flexor, and I was getting ice treatment on that until one day, the last day of double days, I was complaining my foot hurt a little bit. It was sore. So I went in and I grabbed an extra bag of ice, and the trainer saw me and they said, what are you doing with this extra bag of ice? I said, oh, it's for my foot. He said, let's see your foot. So I took my foot out, and there was a small little bump on the right side of it, which apparently is where your fifth metatarsal is. They said, it's broken. I said, how is it broken? I'm walking on it. They went off, they got a tuning fork, they struck it, they put it on the foot, and I started to scream. So I realized it was broken. But I heard so many good things about the Humbio community that they're sort of there for you, they're there to support you, and there are people who actually care about your well-being and what you're doing. I've also heard that before going into it that, you know, things come up in college. The reason why I grew up in Oakland, I always wanted to go to Cal, but I heard that Cal had just structural problems of if you wanted to start with a major, you couldn't switch. If you had a class problem, you couldn't get out of it, and you were just a number. I heard that you weren't really a number in Humbio. People were there to support you and sort of carry you, not carry you through, but carry you along. Kenny, the grad student, who's now Dr. Kenny, was the first person I really worked with in a lab experience and started teaching me some of the essential parts of basic research, which is that you have to ask good questions and you have to be okay with failing. At Stanford, we definitely have the Stanford Duck Syndrome. No one wants to accept failure. We're all entrepreneurs starting up the Instagrams and the Googles, but 99% of startups don't work. So there's sort of a culture in place of we got to go out and do things, but we're not allowed to ever mess up. We're not allowed to ever make a mistake. And you don't learn that way. You learn through messing up. You learn through making mistakes. When I was in the lab, I was doing a gel electrophoresis on a Western blot. I'd finally got it right. I'd failed 4 times previously. In celebration, I turned around to tell Kenny, the grad student, and I knocked the box over with my elbow. And I failed again. And I learned. It's a learning process. These things are going to happen. You got to keep moving forward. I love talking to the youth, as I call the youth, because now I'm the elderly. I had so many questions, and that's just sort of my nature, and I want to help. I always want to try to see, well, you don't have to make the same mistakes I did, and you can do some of the positive things that I was able to do. I actually started a mentorship program called the African American Mentorship Program, where we take African Americans interested in either pre-med or the biological sciences, and we pair them up with either psychiatrists, psychologists, health practitioners, general physicians, to sort of show them that you need to ask these people these questions, and that's really going to be the only way that you'll get through what you're going through, because they've managed to achieve what you want to achieve. You know, I've received accolades at Stanford University. I've done a lot of things at Stanford. It's not because I was the brightest, smartest, quickest guy around. It's because I tried hard, and there were people always putting me in positions to succeed. I think what happens is it comes back to this fear of failure. And if you're always afraid that you're going to fail and you're going to wash out and you can't do it, you're going to struggle. If you believe I'm inherently bad at chemistry, guess what? You're not going to be very good at chemistry, and you're going to struggle, and then it's just going to reinforce, I can't do this. And I think what happens is you come in, they sit you down with, 1,600 other people, and they say, who was, mayor of their province? Who was designed an iPhone app which has generated $1 million in revenue? Who has, patented 3 products? And you say, oh, it wasn't me. If it wasn't me, that means every single other person has more talented, more qualified, smarter, better off, more prepared for the rigors than I am. And then it just starts to weigh you down. I think the most important thing is you say, well, look, people are doing them and I'm doing me. And I do things not necessarily greater or better or grander than anybody else, but these are the things I'm passionate about and these are the things I want to do. Yeah, I think I've always been a person of strong passion. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a professional basketball player more than anything in the world, and I was convinced I was the best basketball player in all of Oakland. I was probably wrong. I moved on from that to saying I want to do this engineering stuff. I said, oh, I want to do the biological sciences, but it's always been sort of a wider net. I've always had an interest, so I want to make new things, I want to bring things to people, and I want to help in a field that's very, very broad. So right now I'm interested in stem cells, regenerative medicine, genomics, personalized medicine, but those are huge bubbles and huge umbrellas. And so what do you really want to do in them? And I don't know. And the analogy I sort of come up with to explain to my mom when she asked, what are you going to do with your life? Is I know that there was a time when there was a man who repaired vacuum cleaners for a living, who was probably born before the time the vacuum cleaners were invented. So how did he prepare to repair vacuum cleaners? He would have had no idea growing up that vacuum cleaners were ever going to be around, but he must have been developing some set of skills or tools to allow him to transition into that field when it emerged. And I think that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I suggest other people do, is to say, well, what do you want to do, and how can you sort of prepare yourself for whatever happens? Things are going to change. You're going to meet people that are going to change your life over a cup of coffee, or you're going to see something on the TV that's going to completely redirect your life trajectory. And you need to be prepared for that, and you need to be open for that. I found, I was working in a stem cell lab with, as I mentioned before, Dr. Kenneth Gibbs, and we needed a faculty advisor. And I thought, I don't know anyone. And that's why I started to learn, you need to start talking to people so you do know people. But I didn't know many people at the time. I was asking him, well, who should I select as my faculty advisor? What does that even entail? What should I be looking in a faculty advisor? And he says, well, my thesis advisor is Irv Weissman, so you might want to talk to him. So I said, I'll give it a shot. I didn't know who he was. I wrote him my dad suggested I write him a handwritten letter. So I wrote a handwritten letter. He got back to me. I talked to him, and he said, I can sort of serve as this mentoring lab-related resource. I'm not as familiar with the undergraduate scene, so I won't be as helpful there, but I can help you with, well, what do you want to do as far as a career in science? And it's been an invaluable relationship. He's been fantastic to me. He's helped me get into the labs subsequently. But the first thing I did, once I had my faculty advisor, he said, well, what do you want to do this next year? I said, I don't know, I guess research. So he says, well, go do some research and come back to me. So I went off to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, to the Wake Forest Institute of Regenerative Medicine with Dr. Tony Atala. And I spent my first summer just alone doing science. So that was the closest thing I ever got to what's it like to be pursuing a PhD and living that life. And it's a difficult life. It's you're very sheltered when you come to Stanford. You have the food and everything taken care of for you. You've got the facilities, you've got the bikes, you've got a car. Didn't have any of that. So it was a really great learning experience. One, just living alone like that, but also when I showed up, there was actually the USDA and the FDA were having sanctions levied against the facility because of an animal rights problem. So I showed up 2 weeks late because of Stanford getting out so late, and I couldn't start my project until 2 more weeks. And that's when I started to learn it's not just science. There are a lot of factors going in, all collecting. There's the science, there's the government regulation, there's money, there's ego, there's funding. And that was when I started to learn, okay, well, science really is a broader field than I originally anticipated. And that has served me well, learning, you can get the skills down, you can make sure you mark your test tubes and run your facts analysis, but if you don't see the bigger picture, you're definitely going to struggle as you try and work your way through this discipline. In a place like Stanford, I remember I met for the first time Samuel Cheshire, who's also one of my advisors. I work in the Samuel Cheshire lab over at the Stanford Institute of Medicine, Regenerative Medicine facility. And I showed up, I met him, and the first thing he says is, oh my God, I forgot, I have rounds. Put these scrubs on and come with me. And that's when I decided, well, I have to serve this man. And it's been one of my better ideas working with Sam Cheshire. But we showed up, first day I show up to the lab, there's nothing there. There's not microscopes, there aren't gloves, it's just tables. We don't have a computer. And I thought, oh my God, everything's sort of been handed to me so far. I'd always show up in a lab that had been around for 10, 15, 20 years. And I've been able to help because all I had to do is ask, oh, where's the stuff? And I'd show up and I'd do my little part. But this time I was A, trying to do my work, but B, also trying to help put together this infrastructure at the same time. Before my freshman year, I went to one of the pre-Stanford parties for the region, and there was a woman talking about how essential it was that I did an honors thesis. And I just took that as gospel, and I said, okay, well, when the time comes, I'll do an honors thesis. I didn't know what in yet, but I knew that I was always going to do it. And then when I decided to declare Humbio and I was involved with the lab stuff, I said, all right, well, let's work on the project I'm working on in my lab with Samuel Cheshire for my honors thesis. And it was way harder than I thought it would be, and it took a lot longer than I thought it would, because it was more than just answer this question, because we had to develop the question first. We had to develop the question, we had to put together, I spent months just trying to figure out the protocol, what protocol would work. And I went down blind alleys, and I went the wrong way, and I made errors, and I dropped tubes, and and machines broke down, and it was a challenge, but it was a challenge I wanted to fulfill. I said I wanted to do this thesis. I wanted to contribute to my own scientific pursuits as well as those of the lab. So I worked through the summer, went in the morning, went to the lab, went home, studied for the MCAT, came right back, did that every day. I told people that wasn't a very exciting summer. Came back in the school year, kept working in the lab, trying to develop an idea of how to implement this technology, which is anti-CD47 therapy. So our lab's focus is that there's this antibody which is able to block this interaction between a ligand and the cell surface receptor. And it eventually prevents these cells from dividing and dividing because it sort of stops a "don't eat me" signal. And when it says "don't eat me," the cells don't get eaten. And then when we block the "don't eat me" signal, the cells do get eaten. And that was really the plan. That was how we were going to tackle brain tumors. We're going to add this antibody and see, can we get the cancer cells to stop saying "don't eat me," and can we get rid of them? Doing a lot of good work. I finally figured out how to run some of these protocols. Now somebody else doesn't have to. And now somebody else can take my work and do it better and do it faster and move it forward to somebody else. So that somebody else comes along, they can take that effort and just keep moving it along. It's a snowball effect. I think what Humbio teaches you is we're not promising you an easy way through this. We're not promising you A's in all your classes. We're not promising you a stress-free research environment. But we guarantee you'll learn. We can make sure of that. And I think I've grown because of that. I've grown because when you struggle and when you work through things, it's more meaningful for you. You get more out of it. Not that Humbio is trying to force you to fail. I think they're very supportive, as I mentioned before. But I think that they're going to let you be a responsible adult. And they're going to say, here's a challenge, work it out.